Hello, welcome all. This is a graduate seminar, Morphology of Historical Cities. Is everybody ready?
I'm ready.
Yeah.
Yes, we are.
Yeah. Ready?
I'd like to kindly remind you that you should mute your microphones, and we will start at exactly 11. But now we can start. So since everybody is ready, welcome. I'm Simge. I'm a fourth year, about to be graduating student, architecture student at Özyeğin University, and I will be doing the introduction of the discussants right now. If we can just. So first, we will do a lecture and then 20 minutes of discussion, and then another lecture and then another discussion. And then we'll have the questions and the answers to those questions at the end. So now I will be introducing Cemre. Cemre graduated from Karşıyaka Anatolian High School in Izmir and later on went to New Hampshire, USA for an exchange year in BAMBÓ High School. She's currently majoring in architecture and minoring in communication design in Özyeğin University. She has participated in international urban design workshops and space student workshops. She's a member of board of management of ÖZGE Club of Architecture and Design. She recently returned back from Erasmus program in Universidad degli Studi della Campania Luigi Vantivelli in Caserta, Italy, due to the current COVID-19 pandemic. Moving on to our discussant, one of our discussants.
Can you move to the next slide? Cemre, move to the next slide.
Cemre, if you could just move to the...
Yes, thank you.
The next one, please. Okay, I will be reading the bio. Professor ATTILIO PETRUCCIOLI, sorry for the mispronunciation, Professor Doctoral School, Dr. CEO, Architettura e Costruzione, University of Rome, La Sapienza, Italy. Degree in Architecture, University of Rome, La Sapienza in 1970. A degree of Oriental Studies, University of Venice, Ca' Foscari in 1980. Former Aga Khan Professor of Architecture for Islamic Societies at MIT and Director of the Aga Khan Program at MIT and Harvard University in 1994 to 1998. From 1998 to 2012, Professor of Landscape Architecture at the Department of Civil Engineering and Architecture, Polytechnic University of Bari, Italy. He served both as Dean and Director of the department. He has provided professional advice in the field of Islamic heritage and development in the most of the Arab countries, among them Algeria, Libya, Egypt, Palestine, Syria, Saudi Arabia. As a result of his long-lasting and passionate interest in both architectural design and history of Islamic architecture, he has written and edited 33 books and more than 210 articles on these topics. Among the books, Dar al-Islam, La Architettura del Territorio nei Paesi Islamici, Roma, in Rome, in 1985, Il Guardiano Islamico, Architettura Natura Passaggio Milan Eletta in 1994, Understanding Islamic Architecture in London, published in London 2002 with Halil Pirani, The Eastern Dome of Islam in Stuttgart 2004 with Annette Gangler and Heinz Gaube, After Amnesia, Learning from the Islamic Mediterranean Urban Fabric in Bari, 2007. Now I will be introducing our second discussant, who is Raimundo BAMBÓ Naya. He holds a degree in architecture from the University of Navarra in 2000, with second prize sorry, Prize in Architecture Studies, and Extraordinary End of Studies Award 2001, PhD from the University of Zaragoza in 2016. He has been adjunct professor and assistant professor at the School of Engineering and Architecture of University of Zaragoza in the areas of history and theory of architecture and urban design and planning. Guest professor at the Monterrey Institute of Technology and Higher Education, IUAV de Venezia, and the Superior Technical School of Architecture of Barcelona, among others. Member of the Urban Landscape and Contemporary Project Research Group. He simultaneously undertook professional activities at IDOM ACXT Architects between 2000 and 2013. His most relevant works are the lineal urban park on the Ebro Riverside in Zaragoza, the main building for the Zaragoza 2008 exposition, the Vehicle Research Institute in Alcaniz, or the restoration of the municipal archives in Huesca. They have been acknowledged by local, national, and international institutions and associations. Our third discussant is Massimo Angrilli, architect and PhD. He studied at the architecture faculties of Pescara and Paris Tobiac. He received a PhD in urbanism at the Inter-University Doctorate of Rome Pescara in 2000, with a thesis entitled Green Urban Network with landscape architect Michael Hugh Ho, sorry about the mispronunciation, University of Toronto, as external tutor. He is associate professor in urban design at the architecture department of Pescara and visiting professor in the Universidad Autónoma de Barcelona. Author, among others, of the book Piano Progetto Passeggio Urbanistica e Recupero del Bene Comune, with a postfazione by Francesc Munoz, Reti Verdi Urbane, with a preface by Michael Ho, author of papers published in national and international scientific magazines. Now I will be introducing Associate Professor Alessandro Camiz, who is our presenter today. Alessandro Camiz, are we? Yeah, okay, thank you. Alessandro Camiz graduated in architecture at Sapienza University in Rome, 1999. Before graduating, he cooperated with Sartogo Architetti Associati for the new Italian embassy in Washington, D.C. and the Church of Jesus Holy Face in Rome. In 2007, he discussed his doctoral thesis on history of medieval town planning in Ravenna, in Sapienza, and therein attended postdoctoral studies until 2014. He taught at the School of Architecture of University of Miami and at the Faculty of Architecture of Girna American University, where he directed until 2018 the International Center for Heritage Studies. He is member of ICOMOS Italy and Secretary General of the Cyprus Network for Urban Morphology. He is now Associate Professor and Director of the Laboratory on Dynamic Research on Urban Morphology at Özyeğin University, Istanbul. His main research interests are in architectural design, urban morphology, and advanced digital technologies for documentation and conservation of architectural heritage. Within his recent publications, Galata Waterfront Models, Types, and the Morphology of Meaning in Architecture, to be published in 2020, and also Integrated Digital Survey of the Urban Tissues in Galata Waterfront, Istanbul, which is published in 2019, and also with Strappa and Carlotti. Camiz has another publishing in 2016 about urban morphology and historical fabrics, contemporary design of small towns in Latium, Gangemi, Roma. Professor Alessandro, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome everyone to our seminar. I'm going to very briefly introduce the course that we are now teaching, which is called Morphology of Historical Cities. So today we are going to present the results of the studies and researches of the master and PhD students of the course of Morphology of Historical Cities. Now the course was based on a syllabus that had the learning outcomes that you see, and the most important one, learning outcome 6. They were supposed to write and publish an academic paper about an urban settlement. So what we're doing today is part of this course. So this is the book we have based our teaching on. Maybe you know Gianfranco Canigia, Gianluigi Maffei, the English edition of the very important book. Most of the activity has been done online, of course, hence the lockdowns. From March 23rd, everything happened online. So within the workshop, which is called Writing Urban Form, the students have been step-by-step building their research paper, wiki, abstract, podcast, abstract, extended abstract, literature review, and then we are now in step number 6, which is the public seminar or panel, where they are presenting in public their researches, and we have distinguished guests as discussants. The next step, starting from Monday, is that they will be submitting their revised paper onto the module of, we also had a number of lectures with guest lectures. Let's go very quickly through these. So they had the chance to take a look at other people's researches throughout the world: United States, Denmark, Australia, South Africa, Iran, Brazil, Turkey. So their next step is after this seminar, so after your remarks, they should eventually revise their research and paper and then submit this through the Moodle platform, where there's going to be a peer review. Students are going to be reviewing each other's work with the online peer review in the Moodle workshop plugin, which we are experimenting. And so with these 10 aspects listed there, they're going to be answering and giving grades to their own work. I'm going to do some review as well. And after that, on June the 9th, I don't know what's wrong with the characters here. Let's go back to the other slide. On June the 9th, they will be submitting their final paper for the exam. But after that, they still have one more month, if they wish, to publish that paper. And which is going to happen in July. And that paper would be submitted to the new journal that we are launching, which is coming up in a second. There you go, which is coming up, Forma Civitatis, International Journal of Urban and Territorial Morphological Studies, a journal that we started in 2014, but we had trouble in launching issue number 1, so that's going to happen in September somehow. So they are writing a paper, we are today discussing the paper, they're going to be submitting the paper for the peer review for the exam, and later on for the publication on this journal. And eventually, if they would like, they could also present this paper in the Camerino seminar, which is going to be online this semester. And it is open to students of all levels for the presentation of their projects. So Jembre and Simge, take a look at this one. You might do as well. So finally, I can now give back the ground to Simge for the presentation. No, Jembre, I beg your pardon, for the presentation of the first lecture. Thank you.
Hello, so can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Our first Özyeğin is going to present first. Özyeğin graduated in architecture at Gebze Technical University and holds a master's degree in architectural design from Istanbul Technical University. She is now PhD candidate in the Design, Technology and Society program of Özyeğin University and research assistant since 2017. She is a member of the Dynamic Research on Urban Morphology Laboratory at Özyeğin University.
Thank you, Cemre, for introducing me, and thank you for being here. I am very happy to for being able to have your comments on my research. Now I am going to share my screen. Is it working now? Yes, okay.
Yes, it's working.
So I am going to outline the typological process of Block 11, that is including the remains of the Roman theater of Zaragoza. Zaragoza is on the northern side of Spain, placed next to River Ebro on the main routes that you can also see in this map. The city was founded by Caesar Augustus on the site of former Iberian city Saldube. With arrival of Muslims, the city became a taifa in 714 to 1118. During this time, the plan of the city had major changes. In 1972, ruins of the Roman theater were discovered during the construction of a new building on Veronica Street, and you can see the museum which is protecting the theater now. This block I am going to talk about. And that indicates in the medievalization process of block, this area has been filled with different buildings, which can be actually with row houses aligned to bearing walls of the theater, while the rest of the block was covered with patio houses. So I wanted to see why did it take this much time to find the theater, and did some research and find the maps. And so almost none of the maps are indicating the shape of the theater in them. And later, to see if the block has any hints about the existence of the theater, I mounted the plans prepared by Dionisio Casanal for Geographic and Cadastral Institute of Zaragoza in 1989. You can see the result on the right corner by comparing the other plans. So it started by putting the building blocks, and after finishing this area, including the theater, which is on the southern side of Decumanus and the east of Curto, later I placed all of those individual surveys inside of those blocks. In here, I superposed the two surveys, but don't know why you're not seeing it here. Never mind. So for the analysis, I'm going to talk about the typological process. The term typological process defined by Kaniji and Maffei to explain the progressive differentiation among building types in the same cultural area. The reason in change of type is progressive variations and adaptations of existing buildings. While the existing building can be a base type, like we have on the left side in this block as a domus, or it can be also a specialized type, such as the ruins of a theater. After losing its significance, it is being transformed into a substratum, which is the base for man to transform and adapt it for his living requirements. While these two examples are not sharing the same exact formation, but they are acting as the substratum. And here we have a row house as the substratum type. So since we know that the theater was actually in this place, I superposed the two surveys to see the change in this block in time. And in here you can see the overlapping walls. and reconstruction plan of the theater done by Miguel Beltran Lores. So here, the typological plan is showing the difference in types in the same block, patio houses on the left, and row houses aligned with the theater, but the pseudo row houses that are indicating the stages of the block take my attention the most, the yellow ones. First, I prepared the route analysis, then illustrated my thoughts on the formation of the block. Both of the pseudo-row houses and the empty area on the left bottom are indicating the stages that this block has been through time. So I tried to identify the types to see the measures for the process. First type is patio house. They have 4 rows, one in the middle, 2 is for circulation, while the other is for courtyard. 2 sides are usually covered with rooms, and the patio is taking shape as a backyard. They are usually 90 to 35 meters. The front side is completely occupied, but this is an ongoing process, so I need to do more research on it. The second type is the row house. They show a wide variety in the block, but they also take shape of the theater and have a direct access to their backyards, which is the former orchestra of the theater. And the last type is pseudo-row house. That gives the hint of former roads in the block, and they are usually monocellular in this case. So lastly, I prepared the plan of block in Roman times by using the information from other research done on that stage. Most of them was sharing the Cardo, 1 block away from the theater on the left side, and the domus between these 2 blocks. On the next step, I compared it with plan of Ambrosia Tardio and existing roads. It shows the patio houses take shape on the left side by taking the place of the theater after it turns into the ruins. Later, we see the evolution of roads and merging of these 2 blocks. The road on the left is directed to mosque in the north of the city, so this stage might have happened in Muslim era. And then row houses started to take shape of the ruins, while patio houses invade the place of the roads on the left side. And here we are seeing how this block was in 1911. Now there are 2 apartment houses on location of patio houses, while the theater is under protection of the museum. Thank you for listening to me. I'm waiting for the comments.
Okay, thank you very much. Now it's the time for the discussion. Attilio, do you want to start?
I have seen that you compared the Theater Gozza with the Pompei Theater in Rome. And I wonder what are the that you found, and what are the suggestions that you got from the this comparison that you.
Yeah, I think if I can find examples such as those row houses, a change in the urban tissue as the type in the type in this urban tissue, maybe I can foresee another substratum under that the ground that we have now, because the excavations are not done completely yet.
Another thing that I was curious, when you made the analysis of the sequence of the hierarchy of the streets, that means from matrix to planned to restructuring path or street. The restructuring path that you marked to the right what could be the origin? Because a restructuring path is expensive. It's always very determined, and it is decided and so on. It doesn't come casually. It's something that requires a magnet on both sides of the new street. And I looked in the aero photo of the Zaragoza. I don't know the city, but I didn't find a real reason to make a restructuring street in that. So I was wondering. I was curious to know from you.
Sorry, Özge, can you share again your screen showing the main map, one of the maps of Zaragoza, so we understand what we're talking about?
In color, it is a final analysis in color that you made at the end of down, 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 down. You have made an analysis with in red you have the matrix, and the light blue you have the restructuring.
Next one, next slide, next slide.
Oh, this one. Okay.
Go on. Okay. You see to the right side. No, you mentioned two. You have noted two restructuring streets. So I was wondering, what are the attractions that made those restructuring streets?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That probably would be outside of the figure, actually.
Uh-huh.
So
One of them is for sure the theater on the left, but you have to find out what happens, what is on the other side, what is attracting that route on the other side.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. And Raimundo, you want to go with yours?
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Camiz, and thank you, Özge, for your presentation. I may add some information not based so much on the methodology, which I think it's perfect, but on local knowledge, since, you know, because I'm from Zaragoza, I was even able to see my house in the aerial picture. I think that I would add what you've been talking about, two different typologies, row houses and patio houses. I would add a third one, which are palaces. You know, Renaissance palaces, which are organized around a courtyard. There were two very important ones, which are in fact in the two void spaces that we see in the northern part of the block. The ones on the left, which is solar, it had a very important Renaissance palace, which was demolished just before this map was traced. That's because it's empty. And the other one wasn't exactly a palace, but it had the same typology, which it was a school, a college, and it's in the place where now we can find there the San Pedro Nolasco Church. I think it's very interesting in how, in the same position, according to the theater, we can find a third typology, which is very different from the other ones. In fact, the thing about the college, about the school, is that half of it was demolished to build the church. So what the building we can see just south of the church, it's half of the school. So you could somehow rebuild, make an hypothesis of how the school was. I think that would enrich your research very much. Another thing is to find also the differences or the exceptions to this typological process. For example, the San Andres Church, which is a church which is in the east-south part of the block. It's empty as well in this map, because, you know, this map drawn just the houses but didn't draw churches, palaces, and different buildings. So adding those exceptions, I think that will give you some clues about what's going on in this block. And also, I have some doubts, concerns about if whether it would be interesting to see the block which is at the north now, which is just an empty void. And I think that it could give you also some clues to find these routes or paths, because you know, this road which this street which gets inside the theater, it continues up to the north to the San Lorenzo Street, and I think it would be interesting. Just it's the same as you did with the southern, eastern, and western blocks. To think, so thinking about the northern block would add some very interesting information.
Okay, thank you very much. Now Massimo Angrilli, and then we have a raised hand, so we can take that one after Massimo. Okay.
Okay. Well, Özge, nice to meet you again, at least virtually. Okay, well, I appreciate your presentation. Your PowerPoint is very accurate. So the maps and all the works that you did about the reconstruction, the mounting of the plans. So my remarks are about general questions regarding methodology. So maybe I will suggest in your presentation to explain better explain how to go to your results. So what are your objectives? I mean, in which point are you in this actually situation of your work? Because I didn't understand what are the results you are expecting. Another issue is about the literature review, because if I well understood, you did the literature review in a previous stage, in a previous phase of your work. So it would be useful to know what data you gathered from the literature review regarding this specific research issue. What kind of studies did you find in your review can help you, and what kind of results did the study obtain in the past? Because I think that this is an issue for general research, for academic paper, a very important one, actually. And another point is the presentation style. I mean, in your communication skills, because this is very important during the presentation, how you use your images and your arguments to make the people understand your objectives, understand your ideas, not in a straight way, but with emotionally implications, I mean. And this is very important in my opinion, in the presentation, in the communication style. So that's it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have a raised hand. That is Martin Ebert. You want to make your question?
Hello, Özge. Thank you very much for your presentation. That was very inspiring. I have a question about your method. Did you at any point include vertical information in your analysis, meaning heights?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, in this stage, I didn't include the vertical information because I am still searching for if I can find any surveys of the facades. But for the typological analysis I usually see in almost all researches that they are using the entrance floors. Maybe Professor.
Yeah, my question was concerning about the terrain. If there is maybe traces in the terrain that show maybe that structures or structures that have been destroyed and kind of create mounts that because as I see this now, I imagine this area to be totally flat, but I guess it isn't.
Yes, so it's actually getting higher in around the theater.
Sorry, Özge, there was a slide that you showed very briefly showing the terrain, but maybe you want to comment further on that one. One of your slides.
I didn't hear the last thing you said, Professor.
One of your slides was showing the overlapping of the topography of the terrain with the urban tissue, but you didn't comment.
Here. Yes, I didn't.
Yeah, this one.
Yeah, I can include that information too.
Yeah,
Thank you for reminding it.
I think I missed this one. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Thank you for reminding it.
Can you ask you another minor thing? What about the actual situation of the neighborhood? So is it abandoned? Is it livable place? Is it a high-end neighborhood? So what about the life in it? Because maybe this could be interesting just to know how this is working today. So what's the situation?
I have to be in there to answer this question, I think.
I may
you haven't been, okay, because yes, during the lockdown.
This is like a pre-study on this area.
I was figuring that this was something that you started before the lockdown. Okay.
Well, I may help you also with this question. It's a very livable neighborhood. It's not so high end. It used to be like 30, 40, 50 years ago, a little degraded, but now it's a very nice place to live, and it hasn't fallen into these gentrification processes still. So it's quite a mixture of different people, different economies, and it's a very nice place to live. I live near there, so.
Okay, and what about the usages? So it's residential, it's commercial, it's the shops?
It's mainly residential. You know, it's like the typical city center in Southern Europe, when you can find different shops, small shops, grocery shops, and also there's a commercial street, lots of bars and restaurants as well, but not so many that have expelled the residents.
Okay. No gentrifications.
Not yet. Or well, just maybe just a little bit, but not so much. Rents are still affordable. I would say.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Okay, so let me go with my comments here. So first of all, it's a very nice start for your PhD research. It's also a very good, stage for your paper, which you're currently developing. So congratulations for this. I outline here the mosque, which has been then transformed into a church later on. But what is very interesting is how the mosque is determining the attraction of such as a new urban pole for a restructuring path, which is alternative to the Decumanus Maximus, and determines one of the roads that you have analyzed into your block. That is one point I would look into in the next stage, not for the paper, for the PhD. And then I also noticed that you have somehow analyzed the prevalent measure of the patio house. There's a slide. Can you go back to that slide where you show the, the measures of the patio houses? No, not this one, not this one, not that. This. So that is interesting because 19 of, so it should be 1776 times 35 is the typical measure of the Roman domus. What is that? It is 60 times 120 feet. So Roman feet. So this measure is very much close to that one. And I would look, closer into that issue of the measures. And then if we go back to the other slide with the collage mosaic of the plans. Yes, sorry, no, the one before, the one with the matrix route. Oh, this one could be as well. Any plan that, yes. This one. So again, this measure, I'm asking, you see here, it seems to me to be 35.50. Is that right?
Yeah, almost.
Can you check that measure in your next stage? Because it seems to me that it is 35.50. So that these eventually could have been two domus, 1 and 2. And so if this is the case, let me change color to show this. So we have, this is one block, 2 domus. This could have been another block, two blocks with 1 and 2, okay, with 2 domus each. So in this area, you have eventually the persistence of the urban grid, of the Roman urban grid, most probably, not sure, but I'm taking a look at, and this one also could be another block, 35.50. So 1 block, 2 block, 3, 4, and so on. So that gives you the hint of, and you can attempt a reconstruction of the urban grid starting from the information you gain from this collage you have done here. And that's also very interesting. So also, Professor Petruccioli outlined how these restructuring paths, let me change color here, 1 and 2. So this one and this other one, they both seem to lead to the theater or whatever was there, a palace, I don't know, something that was very important. So we know that these 2 restructuring paths were determined by some kind of urban pole that was here. But what was on the other side? That's interesting to find out. So that's one of the remarks that Petruccioli gave you, which is very interesting. But on the other hand, it seems like this one goes to the mosque, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jami, right there, at the end of that path. So again, it seems that the pole determining this other, it's not restructuring in terms of the aggregation of these blocks, but it is in the grid, in the urban grid restructuring path. So if that is the one pole, Jami, over there, what was on this other side? That's another interesting question. And also, even though it's not restructuring in terms of urban tissue, this one looks like another restructuring path. And also, so what was, okay, on that other end? So in a way, you are looking at the types, you're looking at the tissues, but you're looking at the roads also. And how are these roads changing in time? What are the polarities that are determining those changes? And so if you do have a Roman phase, you must have an Islamic phase, and then you would have a medieval phase and so on, and even a modern phase eventually. So that's also something very interesting to look into. And so I suggest that for the purpose of this paper, you try to draw in a matrix the typological process. So you show all those types you have outlined all together into a matrix. Let's clean this, clear, oh my God. in a matrix, just like Caniggia did for the row house
Yes.
or for the courtyard house. So you put them all together and you show them with the same measures, but not the individual buildings, the types. So it's like a sketch, something like this, but a little bit more accurate. And you show them all together. And you try to outline how one moves into the other one. You know, you make an attempt of outlining the typological process, which is about how those types change one to the other one. But congratulations, this is a very good start. So I'm very proud of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from the audience?
Can I have just a quick comment where we are maybe trying to add and help for the final paper. One thing is that often the streets that you classify as matrix, sometimes they have a different behavior on one side from the other. Okay, so one side could behave as a matrix, the other one as a plan, or in general as a connection or things like that. So you have to look more carefully at the behavior of the different sides of the various streets. The other thing that is exciting for me, I mean, is that I would look carefully at the relationship between the fabric that grew around the theater and the theater itself. Try to explain, for instance, why the axis that goes straight in the middle, that is created right in the middle of the theater, and then it is diverted because they probably closed that axis and so on. The curve, that's very interesting, because the curve in the corner is a typical increment, you know, or advance into a space that public space that necessarily was open. So it was a larger space that has been incremented, you know, occupied. It's a typical example of manual. It is proposed a similar example also by Caniggia in his book. I think it's a case, you know, in Como you find it, and so on and so forth, you know. So I just suggest to spend a little bit of time going around the theater and see the different conditions that are created by the strong geometry also of the theater itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Okay, thank you very much. Now you can you can go with continue with the presentation. You would need to share your screen again if you can do that. Otherwise, I can do it. No problem.
I started sharing. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
ABDULMAJEED Mustafa KABIR is coming from northern region of Nigeria, where Hausa is the main language and Islam is the main religion. He's fluent in English, Hausa, and understands a little Turkish. He was born in 1995, September, in Katsina, Nigeria. He graduated from Okan University in 2016, and after he went for a year of required military service in his home country. He is a master student of architecture in Özyeğin University, and he likes playing football, watching and playing football, reading, eating, etc.
Hello, good morning to you all.
Good morning.
Sorry, yeah.
Hello, good morning.
To you all. Nice to meet you. It's really interesting being part of this experience. It's really interesting. So I would like to talk about my research, which is the typological process of Tubali houses. Tubali houses are the type of houses you find in the northern part of Nigeria, which is where I come from. So to begin with, I would like to give us a brief of Nigeria and the northern part of it, and then we go into the main topic, which is the typological process of Tubali houses. So Nigeria is a country situated in Western Africa, and it's been a location for several kingdoms. And so the Hausa and Fulani, these are both languages that are common in the northern part of the country. So we would want to talk about the northern Nigeria, which the Hausas call Ariwa. So it dominates the northern part. Islam is the known religion which came to them in around the 14th century from the Mali Empire. And ever since then, it changed the lifestyle of the Hausa people. Their lifestyle definitely having to do with their buildings, their culture, their tradition. So I would want to talk about the type of architecture. They have Hausa architecture, which is known as Tubali. As I said, it came from the Arabians, the part of Africa. So the Arabians, it came to them through trading. So they have this distinct type of architecture with some specific elements that makes their building unique. So to that, here you can see some characteristics of the buildings, the type of buildings they have. So moving on to the typology, here you can see this is an overview of a settlement. You can see this is the main road, and then you can see their settlements. These are courtyard houses, as you can see here, definitely they are courtyard houses. So I want to talk about the typological process, what makes them, how do they grow from, let's say, a domus house, which is a single house, into a multiple family house, into similar. So what are the reasons, what are the characteristics that these houses go through, the process they go through into developing into a big settlement. So forms of this type of architecture, the Tubali houses, they are mostly courtyard houses, and the courtyards are mostly located in the northeast region of the houses. And then the houses from domus, they merge into bigger houses, insulae. The reason being the family expansion. The people in this area, they get married to the people close to them, let's say the surrounding neighbors. So when the houses are developing, they marry into close families. So this is definitely, this is the main reason where the process, this is the main reason that changes the process of their houses. And I would want to talk about the formation, the type of courtyard house they have. So these people, their courtyard houses are divided into three main areas. We have the public area, which consists of the entrance and sometimes the places of the male. The male do live in the public or semi-private areas. This is because the culture, the religion, Islam, which is brought to them, makes them segregate between male and female. So the females, they do live in the innermost part of the houses, while the males do live in the public and semi-public, semi-private areas, whereby they do accept guests and do their trading sometimes in the main public space, which they call Zori. Zori is, as you can see here, by the right, Zori, and yes, this is the place where they collect guests, and a public area also. So moving on, that brings us to the main topic of discussion, the typology of these houses, Tubali houses. So from what I said earlier on, these houses, they come together from having two single houses, they grow into having a multiple family by definitely marrying into another family next to yours, which is usually what they do. So from what we can see here from this sketch, sorry, I forgot to put the reference of this picture. So we can see here, we have two houses where they come in together. So we have Zori 1, Zori 2, Zori 3. So these are the public spaces which then move into more private spaces. So let's say the Zori 1 and 2 here, we have the public space. The Zori 3, which connects both places with, let's say, the semi-private or semi-public space, and then the inner compound housing the courtyard and the rooms for the wives is the most private space. So here we have a typical plan of Hausa, but what I want us to notice here is, here definitely is a house for one family. As you can see, it has just one entrance with the Zori, and then the rooms for the male, and then we have the main courtyard, and then we have these female rooms at the innermost parts of the house. But what we can notice in this house, I would say, this is from the hypothesis of this paper, this house say, two houses merged together into one. So two domus houses, two domus courtyard houses merged to give us this bigger family house. So from the picture behind, this is what we came up. So these are the two houses. From what we can see here, we can see by the left we have one house and by the right we have another house. So this is what we have, the black being definitely the entrance. So we have two houses here which merged into one, and then we have the boxes above there for the rooms, the inner rooms in the private area, and then we definitely see the courtyards in these houses. So to give more about this hypothesis, we move on to see further samples, further analysis done with bigger settlement that we have. So this is a typical floor plan of the Hausa Tubali house. So from here, we can see this is the entrance going to the number 1, which is the Zori, and then we move all the way to the number 4, which is the inner compound of the house, which houses the most private area of the house and the courtyard. So here we have a map of a settlement in Zaria located. Sorry, I forgot to state that this analysis was gotten from the architecture between, I think, the 1980s to the 1880s, I think, to 1900s. So this was the settlement of the time there. So here we can see some houses here. Some we have them small houses, some we have bigger houses, which definitely in time from small houses they moved into bigger houses. So how do we analyze the process where they grew from being a domus house into insula houses? So from this we try to analyze the domus houses, the single houses. So from here we mapped out about 28 different domus houses just for samples. So we want to take the number 9 and 11. As you can see here, it's a single house. But then from our analysis, we noticed that this could be two houses which formed with time, which formed into a bigger one family house. So we want to take this for analysis and see what we have. Definitely this it's applied to majority of the houses that have grown to develop in time. So number 9 and 11, what we have for now is what we have in analysis. So here by the left, we can see this is just a big compound, the number 9 up and the 11. You can see here, it's a one multiple house. But then from our analysis, we notice that it could be two houses, number 9 giving one house and number 11 another house. So how do these houses become to give us this? So here we can see this for the number 9, we have the entrance, we have its entrance next to the entrance of the house 11. So this gives us the formation process. With time, they merged into one, probably for the reason being maybe marriage, which is mostly the reason why these houses do develop into bigger houses to house multiple families, children, and sometimes multiple wives, because their culture allow them to marry up to 4 wives. So this, we can say, is the process of this type of houses. And then we can see the type of houses, the entrance usually to the road, the entrance is always to the road, and then the innermost part of the house where you house the rooms for the wives, and then near the entrance you have rooms for the males of the houses. So this is the main characteristic of this type of Tubali houses found in the northern part of Nigeria. So thank you. That's just a brief of my research I'm working on.
Okay, thank you very much, ABDULMAJEED. That was very interesting. So let's make another round of discussions following that same order. So that's ATTILIO PETRUCCIOLI.
Thank you very much. I found rather interesting this example because it's the reply of one civilization to the archetype of the enclosure. I have three questions. so 3 suggestions at the same time. The first one, if you can, for your paper, if you can just make a quick thinking about the differences that that exist in the different civilizations in the courtyard house. The courtyard in itself is an archetype, and that it is played in different ways by the different civilizations. If you compare your examples that are examples that come from Africa, from a rural condition in a certain way, with the Roman domus, for instance, you know, both are courtyard houses, but they are extremely different. The first one I would define very serial. The second one I would define very organic. The second one tries to establish hierarchy between the elements and in all the system with axialities, tries to solve the corner, and so on and so forth. Why your examples are very serial, and the organization of the elements within the courtyard are not determined by control of geometry and so on. The second issue is, I was very much interested into the map with the 28 houses that you have mapped there. I think that is the most interesting achievement of your research. My suggestion to implement your work on that map is that you should consider that a courtyard, the layout of a courtyard in general is determined by 2 factors. One is the orientation, and if I'm not wrong, you mentioned sometimes that they tend to orient the house according to the wind and the breeze, if I'm not wrong. The second is the relationship with the path, with the street. So I think that you could arrive to a much precise classification if you could look at your examples and try to see how they are organized in relation with the entrance, where the entrance is, and so on. I have seen some attempts with that Zaura, the entrance into the corner, things that are interesting. And also, it is interesting to note that in the layout of the house, you have the presence at the same time of old types that looks like round shelters that most probably are the oldest, but still present, and more regular, let's say, rooms, let's say, that obviously are necessary for the aggregation. In the moment in which the house becomes more and more specialized, and then you need to aggregate parts of it, then they have to be regular.
I'm sorry for the cycles. We have here, actually they are not rooms, they are actually trees, because you can see here we have some of them outside.
Okay.
Actually, yeah, within the house.
That's good. That's funny. Okay, so forget about the third question. You know, so just deeply into this kind of reading of this kind of thing. See the relation of, and also you can see also evaluate the certain hierarchy of the different streets and parts, and see the relation of the house to the parts.
Okay, thank you very much. I do appreciate your comments. I will definitely put them into consideration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And the next one would be Professor BAMBÓ.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, ABDULMAJEED, for your presentation. Also agree, which is very interesting. I have read the first draft of the paper that you sent, and the first thing that I noticed is that I was missing the the way the houses group or the urban processes because of how these houses build a settlement. Well, that concern was completely forgotten after seeing your presentation. So I think that the most interesting thing about it is that you're not just talking about the houses and the typology and the residential typology, which of course is very interesting, but how these houses are building different settlements, about these processes, and how you can't explain a typology without explaining the settlement that they build, and you can't explain a settlement or a town or a city without seeing how these houses are. So I think that's very important, and I think it's very well focused on your presentation, and also all these different kind of processes, how these houses group and build the city, but also how they merge and make new houses, and that reflection you made about that central house and how they group. I think that it's very very interesting. I would suggest you to make your own drawings. For what I have understood, you have gathered, recompiled different drawings, different plans, different maps from different sources, and I think that's a first step, and it's very interesting. But I think it would be also interesting to make your own drawings, so you could draw in a very intentionate way all the things that you want to explain, and in that new drawings that you would make. So for example, that little confusion we had before about the trees. So the trees could be drawn in a very different way. So you could use I don't know, one color, one graphical code for the walls, or for the enclosed regions, for the streets, or for other elements, for example, the trees. And well, that's a question. I don't know if these trees have also like they could be incorporated to define how the typology is. And do all the houses have a tree? Do those trees have an importance beyond providing shade, or all that kind of thing? Thank you. Good to meet again.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, the main reason for the trees, definitely it's shade, because the location of the northern Nigeria, it's close to the Sahara, which makes it to be a very hot place, as we know. So the main reason for it is the trees, definitely to provide, also to reduce dust and wind coming from the northeastern of the Sahara. But definitely, I do appreciate your comment, and I'll put in effort to make my own drawings, and I believe it will give further clarification of what I'm trying to do here. So thank you, I do appreciate it.
Okay, thank you very much. Massimo Angrilli. Sorry, let's recall that Chieti-Pescara has a group of people which is working on African architecture. So that would be interesting in the future eventually to put them in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I found very interesting your presentation and your topic. So one question is actually it's the same as Attilio Petruccioli already did. It's about the comparison with the other courtyards in all over the world. I was thinking about the Hutong in China, or many other, and this could be interesting, how to find out criteria in comparison with the other examples. Another question is about, is there a process of protection of those houses? Are they protected in some ways? Can you answer, please?
Protection, I would want to understand from climate or from?
No, I mean from the government, because in the slides that you showed, I noticed that the houses are very well conserved. So I was wondering if there are if there is a process of protection by rules.
Actually, over time, definitely the houses have changed. They have developed into modern houses that we have now. So I would say the government did not conserve these houses. Although in some areas where you haven't modernization and urbanization haven't reached them, you can still find some of these houses. But over time, they actually have been changed.
So there are no conservation rules. I well understood.
Yes, no conservation.
No conservation. Oh, because your study could be very useful in the process of promoting conservation process. So yes. I will suggest to propose your paper to the municipality, or I don't know. Another question is the relationship with the modernity, because in your abstract you wrote that those kind of buildings are no more the typology of residential buildings. And so what happens with modernity? It's totally different kind of construction of typology, or what else?
Well, with the coming of modernity, they took some elements, some main elements, let's say like the wall murals or the zonko, the things you find on the roof. So they took some of the elements to make sure they keep it still being a Tubali house, and then definitely change the materials with a new way of construction. So they took some elements, just some elements.
Just decorative elements.
Just a few elements into the buildings they do have today.
Okay, so the technology and the materials are totally different.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so it's very interesting. I think that you really could make a proposal with your study to the municipality for protecting those houses. Okay.
Okay, thank you a lot. Thank you.
Welcome.
Yes, thank you very much. I would also like to congratulate with ABDULMAJEED for his work, which is still ongoing, but very promising, I would say. Now, I noted 3 different comments. And so the first one is on the first slide. Can you go back to the first slide for 1 second, or maybe the second one, the geographical setting? Yeah, so that one is, I think, key to the understanding of this type, because it seems like the region you have outlined there is a border region. Is that correct? So it is in between 2 different cultures, the Hausa and the Fulani, right?
Yes.
So, okay, that is a border region. So therefore, we would have 2 different cultural areas, not only linguistic and religious, but maybe even architectural. So I would suggest that you take a look at what kind of typology of houses you have on both those 2 regions. And then also try to find if eventually in this specific type, we have elements or connections or similarities with those 2 different cultures. Because we would expect generally that as they might speak the 2 languages in that area, bilingual, you know, you might have a house which has connections with those 2 different cultures. So that would be very interesting to look into. And then looking at the aerial photograph, slide number 6, I think that you can find, Google photographs, zenital photographs, and so that you could look a little bit more closer into the urban tissue, not by not having a map, but having a photograph, but you know, the zenital photograph. that could give you, yeah, but you can find them on Google Plants, probably, Google Maps. And now, so within your research hypothesis, which is about the merging of two or more houses into a larger unit, and with the fountain, cistern, the water acting as the merging element.
Yes.
These fountains were not shown on the plan. So
yes, actually, with further research, I came to realize it wasn't a main characteristic of the courtyard houses.
Yes, but in the plan you have of the urban tissue, we cannot see where the fountains are. I'm sure that's not going to be simple to find out because they're very small. I mean, in this one we see the well is there, but on the other one we don't see where they are. So maybe taking a look at this same block with the Google Maps, you might be able to spot where fountains are and show them in here. But on the other hand, in these houses, as I see them here, we have four main elements. One is the enclosure, the other ones are the rooms, and then the zaura, the entrance, but also the tree.
Yes.
The tree is eventually part of the house. And eventually those four different elements could belong to different areas, different cultures, where this is a hybrid house, which is putting together different elements coming from different cultures, namely Islamic, Arabic, or local, whatever. It's quite complex in its form. It has different elements. It might be the aggregation of two smaller units, that's possible, but it also looks like this drawing is showing this clearly. The zaura is something different from the other rooms. They're different, they belong to different types. And this house is putting together those two elements, the zaura and the other rooms, and the tree, and the enclosure, and the well. So I would try to look into all of these different separate pieces of the house and try to analyze them further. And how do they then arrange themselves within the enclosure? Whereas on the other hand, you have looked very well into these, how can I say, social divisions of the house, public, semi-private, and so on. That is interesting and good, but I think you have to look a little bit more into those different elements of the, and don't forget that the enclosure is one element of the house as well. So you got the enclosure, the tree, the rooms, the zaura, and the well, to find out and map on those drawings that you're showing. So the next slide showing the plans of those two houses that you did should include the tree.
Okay.
This one, it should include the tree, but most of all, it should include the position of the well, because that is the element you're talking about, right?
Yes.
And so again, looking at the urban structure, looking at the aggregation of those houses, looking at the houses themselves, at the elements of the houses, you might be able to build a matrix showing, outlining, let's say, the typological process of that specific house. Okay, so thank you very much. Is there anyone else that would like to add some comments from the audience? We are very much ahead of schedule, so we have plenty of space for discussion if you wish. We might even go for a second round if you want. Okay, no one else, so we can go to the next one, Cemre.
Uğur Yağmurdereli graduated in architecture at Istanbul Yeditepe University in 2004 and has been practicing architectural design and conservation since then. Since 2018, studying Masters in Architecture at Özyeğin University. Main research interests are tourism architecture, historical cities, urban morphology, design as a whole, and theories of architecture.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
It's really nice to meet you here. And I will talk about the changing morphology of Kadıköy, Istanbul today. So I'll talk about the changing morphology of Kadıköy, and I will make a quick analysis of the typological and morphological transformation of Kadıköy historical town, which is also known as the historical marketplace. And I will specifically discuss block 23 on the very center of the historical town. So Kadıköy is also known as Kalkedon, is a small harbor village across the Bosphorus from the historical city of Istanbul. And it's as old as the historical center of Istanbul, and dates back to 675 BC. So this small harbor village has always been an important transportation node throughout the ages. For the population lived here on both sides of the Bosphorus, Istanbul, and it's also a gateway to Asia, to also Anatolia. Here we see an illustration made by one of the first mayors of Kadıköy, Mr. Esat Arseven, illustrated in 1958. Sorry. It shows the morphology of from the 5th century AD, and it resembles the typical aspects of a medieval town. So when we come to 19th century, there were 882 houses, 290 shops, 2 mosques, 1 bath, 1 Greek church, and 1 Armenian church. So we see that it's by means of population, this was a diverse town. So as we can see, the Kafer map of 1821, the Kadıköy center is taking somehow a form of a town. The rest, which is occupied by the high-rise buildings today, are the vineyards. So from in comparison with 1860 and 1882 maps, we see that there's a rapid growth through the land, and because since it was a popular countryside place for people who live in Istanbul, they came here to spend their spring and summer seasons here in their mansions. So in Kadıköy had 2 big fires, one in 1855, which destroyed approximately 250 buildings, and in 1878, which destroyed 150 more buildings. In 1856, a new regulation was made in line with the era's Tanzimat reforms, the modernization reforms, in order to keep up with Europe, let's say, the Ottomans' effort to reach up to Europe's standards, the modernization process. And it ordered all buildings in the area to be built in masonry rather than wood, to prevent more damage and spread of the fire. So that changed the morphology and the building process. So the fires and thus the regulation, it gave way to change in morphology, and this time instead of conserving or sustaining the existing morphology of centuries, a brand new grid plan was implemented. In that grid plan, we see a lot of big fires around Istanbul in general. So the Ottoman Empire has a process of implementing a grid plan where a huge fire occurs. You know, they have a grid plan in their drawer, and whenever there's a big fire, they implement the grid plan there and change the morphology. After 1930, Kadıköy was declared a municipal town, now having its very own municipality and transforming from a harbor village of countryside to a municipal town. So the transformation process has started then. And it became a small countryside village, a harbor village, to becoming a touristic and recreational attraction center of a city-sized population, which is now it's 33 square kilometers by today, with a population of about 600,000 people. And while Istanbul master plan was designed by urban planner Henry Prost in between 1936 and 1951, there was no plan or no observation plan developed for the historical town. Maybe we should thank for that he kept Kadıköy intact. He left it as it is. So when we come to the historical marketplace or the historical center, heritage map of 1930 is the oldest document that we can reach that shows detail. And the red boundaries show the historical town center's boundaries. The town center is limited to a small nuclear area, which is approximately 9 hectares, and it's limited with the historical marketplace plan. Here, the urban tissue, the grid plan and topology of the area has nearly changed since 1930s, but there is a big change, a big transformation, especially in typology. So we see the area in an aerial photo of 1946, and we see the formation of the blocks around the grid plan. So we have the aerial views of the area from 1930s to 2020, and still here see the boundaries of the historical marketplace, and on the left-hand side we see the transformation of the vineyards into buildings. As you can see around the historical town center, the vineyards or the gardens have transformed into building blocks, and the land, the sea is filled, and some kind of squares have been created. When we look at the old photos of town center, we see the Armenian church on the right-hand side, and this is one of the two small squares within the center, and we see the building types turning to masonry, and we have shops on the downstairs and residences on the upper levels. And here again, we see the somehow remaining shops and the masonry buildings. And it's a view from the harbor into the town center. This is the Greek church, the second square on the Greek church, which is by my study area, the block 23. We see the block 23, or at least the street adjoining it on the right-hand side of the photo. In here, still we see the shops downstairs and houses adjacent to the church. So, in 1994, to conserve what is left of the Kadıköy Historical Center and prevent further transformation and urban decay, the Kadıköy municipality issued the Kadıköy Historical Marketplace Conservation Plan. And since then, it's been an ongoing and unsolved debate amongst local and national NGOs, the municipality, and the property owners here, because they also have their own association or guild. And everybody agrees that there is a rehabilitation project necessary and it's imminent to save what is left from the urban tissue, because only 225 of the registered historical buildings were left in Kadıköy by 1994 of more than 1,000 buildings of the late 19th century. Here we see the boundaries and the historical marketplace conservation plan here. And the shaded plots show that the historical buildings registered on them. And we see here the block 23. So there was another plan or attempt in 2005. It was named as Kadıköy Historical Marketplace Revitalization Project. And it was hand in hand with the municipality, a big NGO, and property owners, and co-sponsored by a paint manufacturer. And it's said that it aims to make the area an attraction center in the city. So this was all about repainting some of the buildings, as it says in the announcement, its bulletin. It says the marketplace is revitalizing and our colors are coming back. That's all it reads. And here we see the mayor of Kadıköy, the president of the NGO, and paint company president painting a building in ceremony. So, as we said, it was all about repainting some of the old buildings and changing the pavements and lighting apparatus on the streets. But it was all about creating a huge publicity. So it only caused some kind of gentrification, and due to the huge publicity, so it caused rise in rent values and acceleration in transformation. So when we look at the map of today, transformation as of today, we see that from 890 houses from the last century, there was merely none left here. So mostly we see the red colored buildings are shops and charcuteries and food shops. Basically all of them are shops except some of the offices. The offices on upper levels. And now they are also turning into hotels and accommodation facilities. So when we come to our focal point, block 23, we are going to make a typomorphological analysis. Block 23 is in the very heart of the marketplace, and it's a significant sample, significant urban tissue to observe the transformation. Somehow, it's the least transformed block in the urban tissue, and it still preserves most of the buildings on it as they were built. I mean, their footprints. And it faces the small self-proclaimed public square. It's in the middle of the highest pedestrian traffic zone, and it's in the intersection of matrix route and connection routes. Because here we see the Greek church and the Armenian church. So when the Greek plan was implemented, the Greek church and the Armenian church was picked, as we can read from the plans, the maps. They were picked as two pole points, and the matrix route and the Greek plan was created around it. We can see it here. So this map shows the highest pedestrian traffic occurring on the historical marketplace. So at the two poles of the matrix route, Mühürdar Avenue, we see the Greek church and the Armenian church. And although there are two identical openings formed by cutting the edges of the blocks by 45 degrees here, after the big fire, there were two squares created, as I numbered them as 1 and 2. Although they are identical, but square number 1 is formed as a node in time as a public square, and it's also used for demonstrations, protests, and meetings. So when we focus on block 23 on Güneşlibahçe Street, the upper side of the block, we see, okay, I'm sorry about it, I will come to that. We see the historical commercial access with groceries and charcuteries on the road. But today, since a couple of years, there are an attack of restaurants from the east side of Güneşlibahçe Street, and they are slowly gaining control over the shops here and forcing some of the charcuteries to go out. The Yasa Avenue connects the road to the shore, and it's a route to the shore, and it's also one of the main routes in the town center. As I said, Mühürdar is the matrix route of the historical marketplace, and it's the most diverse access by means of typologies. We can see a various selection of typologies here. Serasker Street, that narrow street, is a connection route with shops and cafes around here. So the hatched plots here show that the registered historical buildings on that plot. As you can see, some of them have transformed in time, torn down, or burnt down, torn down in fires. So some of them are lost today. And there is a transformation map or a comparison map of the transformation of Block 23 from 1930s to 20. So as it can be observed by the comparison of two maps, we we see that especially in here, in the chamfered corner, the buildings are aggregated and they have expanded through their plot into the courtyard to adopt their new functions. The new function is, as we mentioned that, as I mentioned, it's gaining popularity. So that's why the rental fees are high, and it's it's very hard to find a shop here. So to create a decent shop or restaurant, especially, you have to aggregate as many buildings as you can. That's some kind of a commercial rule. So you try to aggregate as much building as you can and go into the courtyard and cover it to create some more space. So although still the digital maps show a courtyard, getting smaller courtyard here as a footprint, but when we look at the satellite maps, the satellite views, it shows that this courtyard is legally or illegally completely covered today to gain space because of the increasing popularity and rental values. When we look at the pictures around the block, we see that some of the old buildings and some of the new buildings on the backside, in the corner of Yasa and Güneşli, which means, which is the route for the charcuteries and groceries, the upper levels have no import. In everywhere, upper levels don't mean any importance because all you need as a restaurant or a charcuterie, you can't take the customers upstairs, so it doesn't mean so much to your business. And also around the block, on the other side of the block, we will observe the transformation. So in this superposition of plotters, the satellite images in 2020 shows the contradictions of the footprints of the buildings. As you can see, the footprints of the cut edge block, although it has a single roof, but the footprint shows that there were more than one buildings around here. And also we can see that the courtyard has been closed, covered by roofs to create more indoor space. So when we come back to the transformation forces those row houses to be merged, aggregated, and transformed into restaurants, both in plan scheme and facade, to make room for maximum occupancy. Because what is necessary or what is concerned is to create maximum occupancy. And on most of the buildings, the upper levels are mostly unattended. Also, another change in type, another point forcing the transformation is after the smoking ban on the inside, most restaurants had to pull their shop fronts inside to create more outdoor space for smokers. So it means that there is only left the side walls from the building, and also the connection to the upper levels, the the connecting staircases were demolished on almost each case, and small still constructed staircases were built to occupy the minimum space in the ground floor level. So here is for the transformation. To keep up with modernity and fashion, and in case to maintain popularity for business, the transformation in accordance with new trends is inevitable and occurs in every couple of years. All of the buildings feel to change in every 5-10 years at least. So if you look at the 2004, it's really hard to distinguish that this building is the same building. As we can see from 2004, it's there are signs everywhere, and the openings were not clear yet, but in 2010, there was a fashion of building the aluminum facades. So they went in with the fashion, and they did that. But when we come back to 2013, so it was no more a fashion, and it was back to its original again. As you can see, there is the trace of the original building behind the aluminum wall. So since this is the view from the Mühürdar Avenue of the block, since 2010, 10 fishermen's shops, 9 charcuteries, 5 spice shops, 7 butchers, 6 groceries, 3 toy stores, 17 bookstores, and 3 florists have given their places to mostly cafes, bars, and restaurants in 10 years. And even though it's still changing today, one restaurant is coming and the other one is going away. As you can see, the block is mostly occupied, as the other blocks around the historical town, with restaurants. And since the typology has changed and the buildings have lost their functions as houses, the upper levels are idle and windows are blinded permanently. On the left-hand side, we see the upper levels windows are clad with clothes. So, since there were no regulations and restrictions until 1994 plan, because until 1980s, there was no conservation of civil architecture. There were merely a conservation of civil architecture until 1980s. So, when we recognized that the historical marketplace was important and we had to protect it or somehow save what is left from it, it was 1994. And it still cannot be considered sufficient because they had to do a revitalization project after 11 years in 2005. So people are still free to break down the facades for shop windows, as you can see here from the shoemaker's shop, or clad them with bathroom tiles, even if they were registered historical buildings or not. And by 2020, according to Council of Historical Buildings, only 125 registered historical buildings are still standing, and they have no more housing function left. And there are no housing units left from 882 houses of 19th century. Due to high visitor attraction, almost all the apartments around the block were transformed into hotels and motels with restaurants and bars downstairs. So this raises the concerns that the marketplace is losing its diversity and becoming monotone and implementing a stereotype for only dining purpose. An example, we see the Armenian church. It's facing, it's still Mühürdar Avenue, just a couple of meters around our block, and it's housing the transformation within itself. On the further right-hand side, you see that Armenian church has rented its area and inner area of somehow they break the wall, and it's working as a cafe. As I mentioned before, the node adjacent to our block and the Greek church is spontaneously transformed into a public square, although it's limited size, but it's replacing the main square, which is now an undefined area, unfortunately, between the marketplace and the waterfront, because it was punctured by traffic roads and car parks. So the typologies of recent past, such as artisan shops, because the Armenian and Greek are known as their role of doing artisan business back in Ottoman time. Because what they did was this: the Armenians and the Greeks, since it's an Armenian and Greek village of the past, most of the artisan shops, the bookstores especially, as we mentioned, 17 bookstores were closed because they couldn't pay the rising rents, and not to mention the housing cannot survive and diminish in the urban tissue due to high rental values. This photo is an actual collage of the past and today. This road is Yasa Avenue that goes to our block, and this street goes to Armenian church. And today it's said that Europe's largest Starbucks coffee is placed here. So these are the references, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Uğur, for your very long, maybe a slightly too long presentation. But let's go now with the discussion.
I'm so sorry about that.
That's okay, no problem. We have plenty of time. We are ahead of schedule. So let's keep the same order. Attilio Petruccioli.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. Well, I'm rather depressed, not because it's not the fault of the student, it's the fault of the context and the situation. It's really difficult to deal with such old beautiful context when it is under pressure of the tourist development. Let's be positive, of course. Two things come to my mind. The first is a general issue. All this Kadıköy settlement involves the problem of the Tamizat, and particularly the relationship, cultural relationship that is established between two cultures in a certain of the history. It happened in Turkey at the end of the 19th century, in the first moment, and that influenced a lot the morphology of the cities and also the types. It ended up that types changed, but they changed in such a way that new hybrids were created between that were imported from cultures that were alien, like Central Europe and Paris, but also a substratum that was existing. So I think that it's a very interesting phenomenon. to which we have to add a second wave, you know, during the Republic. In the time of Kemal Atatürk, there were again influences coming from Central Europe, and that also influenced the way of making dwellings at the different types for the dwellings particularly. And I think that is a very interesting field of investigation. The second thing that comes to my mind is that if you want to propose a project of conservation and I would say also restoration in the case of a block or more blocks, in order to be credible, you have to provide a very serious, detailed, philological analysis of those blocks, in which you show how it was before, and you decide the date was in 1930s, and is today. The best example of this kind of methodological analysis of the types related to a block, for instance, and in a very that reaches a very small scale, is a small book of the school of Camiz, made in the 70s by Lavagnino, Baccaro, and so on, in which they have analyzed some of Florence. The technique is based on the principle of the stamps collector. If you remember, probably, well, when I was young, I used, in order to collect stamps, I had a special book. I was able to put the different, each stamp, and catalog them also in terms of series or whatever. So I think that if you are able to take one by one the different types and see what they are, how they come, culturally is their hybrid. What is the role of typical local elements like the hayat? It exists in that case, and so on and so forth. And also to relate them to the hierarchy of the streets, because you know they are different and they have different behaviors in relation with the streets. And at the same time, you can do the same also with the present situation. I'm not optimist in the sense that they will listen to you, but at least you will be able to provide a document that will talk to their conscience, if they have one, you know, provided. Regarding that is not very easy to find. It's in Italian, but the drawings are so clear. If you send me a note, I will send you some of the drawings. It's some material that you can use for that purpose.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Petruccioli and Professor BAMBÓ.
Thank you, Hugo, for your presentation. It's very interesting to see how we're talking three different presentations about different urban. We're talking about morphology and processes, but how the speed of the processes are very different in each case, and how each process we can share some methodology ideas between the processes, but also how the speed may demand like different tools to analyze them. In this case, and even in this case of Kadikoy, we're talking about different speeds. We could maybe see how there's one kind of processes until the 1990s and so on, and how this during the last 20 years, everything has speeded up very much. I think it would be interesting to make a taxonomy of the different processes that we are witnessing here. and then this taxonomy could be organized on the impact of the process or the change. We've seen plots grouping, courtyard filling, which is like the most intense change, but also in the same plot, different building typology, or in the same plot, new buildings with the same typology, or even there's no change in the building, but there's a change in the use. And as we have seen, that change implies a lot in terms of how the city is lived. There we could talk about morphology changes or typology changes, but also part of the presentation focused on that, on how the use of the city has changed a lot. And to explain that, I think that we need a broader context in the sense that the impact of tourism in Kadıköy, how many tourists go from other parts of Istanbul or other parts of Turkey, or even other parts of Europe, of the world, the increase of tourism, the change of the places where people live. We talked about how new hotels and motels, I don't know if Airbnb apartments are appearing here, and how there's all this move of the people who used to live here to other parts of Kadıköy, because that helps also to understand how this process is going. And I think I don't know if this research will be enough. I'm afraid not to stop this, but it can be just one part of a broader movement to try to revert this situation. Thank you again, Hugo.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Now the next one is Professor Angrilli.
Sí. Okay, it's a very sad story, of course, and I'm very concerned about. I've been there actually with Alessandro. Is it correct, Alessandro?
Yes, we had dinner there. We had dinner.
Yeah. And we met at the coffee Starbucks coffee. It's a reference point. I saw in the picture the Starbucks coffee, which is at the corner. Well, it's a very typical situation of commercial gentrification, as in many other cities. And yeah, the majority of the gentrification literature had the tendency to focus on the housing sector. But this focus shifted with a number of scholars paying attention to the retail sector. So this is very interesting topic. Commercial gentrification, of course, has many economic benefits, but as you stated, is associated with local disparity of residents and also the losing of many activities, many residence people. So all this commercial gentrification is at the expense of the local businesses, and because we know that the majority of these retails, many of them are coming from abroad. But regarding your paper, I'm interested in the transformation of the interior of the units. You were describing how the two-floor buildings have changed, and the floor plan became shops or restaurants, mainly restaurants, with the demolishing the staircases going up to the second floor. So it will be useful to see the plan of at least one or two cases of those restaurants, the transformation from the pre-existing situation to the actual situation of the della situazione attuale, della situazione corrente, of the current situation, sorry. And it's very interesting how the second floor is left without any function. And this reminds me the commercial malls that usually reply a historical situation. You know that in this kind of commercial malls, it's exactly the same situation. The ground floor with commercial, and the second floor is only a fake second floor. It's a void without any function. So this is very interesting. I will make a comparison with the modern, with the fake historic commercial malls, because it's an interesting point. But I agree, it's very important that you are a practitioner as well, or you are only a researcher. You're a practitioner. So it's very interesting that the future paper could be a starting point for a debate, for a discussion, because this is, of course, a huge problem. But since it's an economic asset for the community, it's very harsh challenge for you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we open the discussion for our guests, we have a number of people here. I would like to hear from them as well. So my remarks about Ubud is that there's a lot of stuff here, you know, maybe, which is good for the purpose of your master research, of course, but for the purpose of this specific paper, you have to, you know, filter all this information and put it into a more focused approach into the understanding of the transformation of one block. Okay, so if you could, you know, collect all those cartographical sources, and maybe you could even redraw them one by one, and then show with different slides the evolution of that block in terms of the information that we have from those plans. But even what is, I think, missing here is who designed and when this urban tissue, because it does appear in the 1890 plan, as I understand, that you showed. So these blocks, as they are in that urban tissue, has been planned sometime in the late 19th century. I recall, I don't remember the name of the author, but it's a British planner who designed the grid, that, you know, part which is very regular with those 45 degrees corners. And it is a British planner, but during the Ottoman rule, who designed that settlement. And so it would be interesting to, starting from, at least from the person who designed the urban grid, trace down the evolution in time of that piece, and especially of that block, looking also only in one block at the evolution of the building types in that. So also one note is about the source. When you say the source is the, what is it, Istanbul database, whatever, that's not the source. This is where you found it online, but the source of the map is, you know, who designed that plan and when it was published. So we need to know, where does the information come from, not where you found it online, but where, you know, the source, the bibliographical reference of each plan. So I suggest that you filter on one block, and eventually in the plan grid where that block is included. But what is missing here is the beginning. When did it start? I mean, that grid as it is now. When was it designed? By whom? And I'm sure if you go a little bit more in detail, you're going to be able to find the name of the person who designed this, maybe the original project, but also take a look at I understand that the two churches were there before. Actually, they do have a different orientation So it's clearly, in my understanding, those two buildings, they belong to an earlier phase of the grid. And so that would be interesting if you could find a plan of how it was before the grid was overlaid on that, and then the project, and then the transformations, all the way to today. So I would try to, cut it out in a more focused, but there's one big question today, which is what will happen in the next years, hence the social distance that is necessary. So I'm afraid that in the future, in the close future at least, those shops will not have an easy life. So what will happen to those gentrified urban tissues with all these shops in the time where nobody will go to those shops? But maybe this is going to change in the next months. We hope we're going to go back to a normal situation. But that's another question, at least to just consider what is going to happen in the future. What might change today for the social distancing policies that have been taken to those shops, to those commercial activities. But we are, again, ahead of schedule. So if we have any other person that would like to comment here, you're welcome to do so. This is a seminar panel, so open to discussion.
Hi there, Alessandro.
Yes.
How are you? Hi, everybody.
Yes. Who's talking?
It's
Hi,
Denver.
Hi,
Oh,
Denver.
Hi.
Denver.
Hi, Massimo.
Nice to meet
How
you.
are you?
I'm
You
fine.
too. Can you not see me?
Yeah, I see you.
Am I invisible?
Yeah, no, I see you.
All right.
Yeah, there
Thank
is
you for the
much,
present.
a lot of sun.
There's a lot of sun. Yes, there's a lot of sun. And we're facing north, which is good.
Hmm.
Thank you, Ugur. Thank you, Alessandro. I do remember the initial presentation a few weeks back, and I thought perhaps I want to just agree with some of the panelists. I think that it's a really great topic, also a little bit depressing, but I think your topic relates to a global phenomenon of the infringement of culture, tradition, and history by globalization, capitalism, and commerce, and the effect that it has on the shape of the form of our historic cities. And it's an ethical question, because you will find there are people on the one side that will say that we need to retain and maintain, and then there are people who will obviously say, but there needs to be change, and we need to not be nostalgic about these things. So although I won't be commenting on that, but I think that some of the panelists, I agree that your project talks to what is the actual physical change, not only in terms of its form, but its program. And the next question is, what does it mean to the people of this area, and what does it mean to the global topic of change brought by commerce and globalization? I think if you can wedge your answer through your project between those two questions, I think then you could start hitting the nail on its head. And part of it is what, for example, Massimo mentioned, is if you could provide perhaps even some drawings just to expand on your analysis, to depict how those changes happen, even on a micro level, through sections, through plans. I think that'll help. Because if you look at your presentation, the tools that you use, it's obviously images and text and research that you've got from research, but also I think adding new drawings by yourself could actually help to further deepen your study. But also the other panelist, Raimundo, if I've got that name right, also mentioned the question about the impact of tourists and where those tourists are coming from, and the where that global change is coming from. Who are the occupants? Who's using those spaces? Why are they using those spaces? And then obviously, how are they using those spaces? Are questions that your project can answer. That's all I have.
Thank you. So we have other guests. Let's hear from them. Hania.
Hello to everybody, and thank you for the presentations and also the very useful comments. Actually, I don't have any specific comment on this project, but maybe a general comment about the area of the Kadıköy, which is one of the very important hubs and nodes of Istanbul. It used to be during the centuries, and it was a commercial center, a port for the commercial stuff like import and export, and also it has a very specific identity in the specific place in the identity of the citizens, as a place for manifestations, for protests, and all of the social activities which used to occur in this area, especially in the square. But in the recent years, the morphological situation of the area and also the activities and behaviors related to these and to the space has changed a lot. For example, by the introduction of the metro system to the Kadıköy Square, the shape of the square has changed a lot. And previously it used to be public space for gatherings, but now it seems that it's more a kind of hub that just passengers pass by to reach their destinations. In addition to this, going a little bit far from this main zone in the square, Kadıköy Square, we are noticing that there are a very vast number of urban regeneration and transformation projects which are occurring all around this province. Actually, there are many informal settlements in the area, or there are zones which are deteriorated and are considered in the situation of being demolished by the earthquake. So let's say a red situation. So this fact has brought up some new interventions in the urban fabric of the area, like changes in the settlements from the family houses and or the informal settlements to large and huge projects of high-rise building and skyscrapers. Beside introducing new shopping malls. So these sort of interventions in the urban fabric of the area has created some specific situations, like creating a fragmentation in the urban tissue of the area. So the situation has changed from being an area for citizens and which used to be a human scale to an area which is just commutable by cars, and it's not the situation of walkability or accessibility easily in the area. So it's just a general comment about the area that can be also the issue and topic of the future studies about this specific area in the Istanbul. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Martin, would you like to say something? Maybe not there anymore. Michelle?
No, I'm still here.
Okay, would you like to say something?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle?
No, Alessandro, thank you. I'm enjoying this. I've got no comments, but I'm enjoying it. Thank you very much.
Okay, Roberto Battistini?
Yes, I'm present. Nice to meet you all. You can hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay, and see me, yeah. I'm just, I wish to introduce myself briefly. I'm a mobility manager on the University of Bologna and also PhD student at DCAM, Department of Civil Engineering, and my field of research is the relationship between city, shape of the city, and transportation, in particular sustainable transportation. And I appreciate very much the opportunity to be with you and follow all the intervention, and I think it's very useful for my research, and I wish to also apply some of our works together if we find a common ground to work on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we're going to have on the 9th of June the final exam of these researchers. So if you would like to join that, just drop me your email in the chat so I can be in touch with you. And Ege? Ege Bayraktar, would you like to make some comments? Okay, let's go now with our students. ABDULMAJEED, would you like to make some comments?
No, thank you. I have no comments.
ÖZGE, would you like to make some comments?
Not a hard question, but I am very excited for reading his paper.
Okay, and Ugur, would you like to make some comments?
Well, yeah, I would, but I'm talking too much when I start making comments. The problem with the original designer of the plan, the sources I looked up say that this is Turkey's planning process. You know, you get a plan or you get a sample of urban tissue from somewhere, namely Henry Prost. Even it's said that Henry Prost heard that his plans were going to be used again once more. It's a rumor that he himself said that, okay, they should leave it in the drawer now, or for this. You know, the planning process works in Turkey like that. You get a plan from your drawer, you just apply it to the plot, and that's it. You have a planned town or city, or somehow. The planning process of Istanbul was like that, the Prost planning process. And the sources I found on the grid plan implemented in Kadıköy says that it was a stereotype that it laid in the drawer. So whenever there's a fire in some village or a town center in Istanbul, they took that plan out of the drawer and implemented there where it's the fire tore down the whole tissue.
Okay, I get your point, but it seems to me that in the first plan you have shown before the fire, the grid was there.
Yeah, the grid was there,
So my question is, who designed that grid and when? So that's the starting point of that urban tissue. That would be very nice to take a closer look at the beginning of that grid, you know? Because we're talking about a grid, we would like to know when the grid was established, by whom, and eventually find further information and then look into the change of that grid in time. But you need a starting point, even though there is something before the grid, so the two churches. So that is, I think, the part you should take a closer look into, and then cut it up down into the block and show the evolution of what happened in which you have done in a way, but you can do more of this by, you know, having 5 or 6 different plans of the same block in time and showing the evolution of the building types. Okay, what else? Who else we have? Demet, would you like to make some comments? Okay, let's go with the discussants. Professor Petruccioli, would you like to make any closing remarks?
Alex,
yes.
I have yeah, an observation and maybe a suggestion for Kodikai neighborhood. I forgot to mention the church situation, because that was very striking, in my opinion. The transformation of part of the church into a cafe. I'm correct, Ugur?
Yes.
Am I correct?
Yes, Professor.
Yeah, this is another interesting point, because this is a very common phenomenon, the cultural heritage commodification. When cultural heritage is transformed into something else, namely retail, and cultural expressions come to be evaluated primarily in terms of their exchange values. So this means that within the context of cultural tourism, which I understood, it's it's one of the points. The cultural heritage become a cultural good. It's transformed into a commodities to be bought, to be sold, and to be profited from the industrial heritage, the tourism heritage industry. So this is an interesting point, and it's one of the maybe most striking phenomenon in your Kodikoi case study. So I would like you to give a deep focus into this problem.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Professor.
Which is part, of course, of the cultural tourism massification, because yes, when cultural tourism was a niche activity for only few people, it was not a problem. But the massification of cultural tourism in many cities, historical cities, brought all those kind of problems, such the commodification of cultural heritage and of cultural facilities, and all the problems that are caused to the local communities because of the perverse effect of tourism industry and of the real estate market, not to mention the Airbnb effect. I don't know if maybe you mentioned the bed and breakfast process affecting the neighborhood. Yeah, this is another interesting phenomenon, but it's too much, because maybe for the paper, but maybe for the master it could be an interesting point.
Yes, thank you very much.
Professor Petruccioli, would you like to make any closing remarks?
Not, but just I want to raise just a very quick question that I always raise when I am talking with English speaking people, it is a question about typology. Typology means discourse about the types, or study of the types. It is a general term, but when we talk of a single type, house type, an individual, we should use the term type. Otherwise, we use the same term for two things that are very different. One is extremely general and one is extremely specific.
Yeah, I agree with this remark. But even for Italian speakers, the confusion about tipologia e tipo is very common.
Well, it's the same in Spain, and I think that sometimes maybe I misuse these terms, and I always am grateful for the comment.
It was great pleasure meeting all of you
BAMBÓ.
and to meet new people, friends, and colleagues.
BAMBÓ, sorry. Any further remarks?
No, not really. Just, it was really interesting to see all these very different presentations, these three ongoing researches. And as I stated before, they are focused on very, very different cities. We've seen 3 continents, 3 cities, 3 speeds of processes, but I think that there's a shared question in all of them is the importance of the drawing and the importance of the graphic research to be able to get some interesting conclusions. And since now there's so many disciplines focused on the city, I think that we as architects and urban planners, we have to be aware of these other disciplines, but just never forget that the drawing and the specializations of the different analyses are very the most important, like the common ground we have, and our most powerful tool to analyze the city and the shape of the city and the way that we live in that city.
I agree.
No, I have one final comment here. Demet, are you there? Would you like to add some comments? Okay, so I'm going to go and close the discussion with my final remark is that thank you everyone for being here. I think this was very much productive. We are going to have the final exam of these researchers on June the 9th. So if anyone would like to take part in that process, send me an email. You would be very welcome to do so. And finally, Ugur, I mean, that block, that grid has a signature, you know, the 45 degrees corners. And that is a very clear signature, which recalls to me what I'm going to show you here, the plan for Barcelona of Ildefonso Cerdà, which is 8059. This one, there you go. So these are the blocks. I mean, it has some kind of, where are the blocks? Let me find them. Where are the blocks? There you go. So that 45 degrees cut design was introduced in Barcelona in 8059 by Ildefonso Cerdà. So I suppose that the person who designed that grid, it was not Ildefonso, of course not, but had in mind that model. So I think that most probably the design of that grid dates to the 1860s or 70s, which is before the fire. And I do not recall, but I remember reading about the name and the author of that design. It has been designed by a British planner, not famous, but you know, it's an information you can find. I'm talking about the grid, okay? And it was overlapped on top of something else that was there. But so that is the part that you should focus it into a little bit more in the next stage. And so thank you very much to all of you to be here with us today. stay tuned for the next seminars that we are going to announce on the website of the laboratory, which I'm going to share for all of you on the chat. So you can take a note. We have the final jury of the studio on Monday, and then we're going to have the graduation studio final exam in the following week. And so I got to go with the chat here and post the link there for you if anyone is interested in following our next events. And what else? I think
the
that's
group
it
photo, Professor.
I beg your pardon?
The group photo.
Oh, we want to do a group photo. So you need to share all those in a gallery view, and we can take a group photo. So, I mean, I'm going to do it myself, but please, other people could help me with this process. I'm not very much, yeah, there you go, messing it up.
Everybody should turn on the camera.
Yes, turn on the camera, everyone, and please make a group photo. There you go. And take another one. And there was something else. Yes, don't forget that now you go into the next stage, which is the submission of the full paper. Deadline is Monday. And then you have to do the peer review of your other papers on the website. And then we will be getting together for the final exam on the 9th. So you have 1 full week to finalize your paper and submit it there. And then we can go on to the next step, which will be the publication of the paper. So thank you very much to all of you for being here. Stop live stream, stop recording.